Hello, namaskar, and a very big hi to all my youngster friends who are watching the show. Well, this show is all about catering to the intellectual needs of generational diversity across the world. I'm Dr. D, your host and host who's going to make things simple and conversation simple. The idea of bringing this show was to make very difficult conversations, which are at 35,000 feet, simple for all of us to understand. So, what I do, I bring leaders who have a lot of experiences and stories to share from each industry so that we can learn and have many key takeaways from their challenges that they faced and from their learning outcomes that they have imbibed in their life. Well, my dear friends, the idea is to become a better version of ourselves. And this is just my small contribution. So stay motivated. This is a living room conversation. Get your teas with Dr. D and let's get started. Today on the show, I have roped in a global leader from the oil and gas industry. And that is one industry that has sparked many wars in our world. But let's simplify it, let's understand it, and let's see what this global leader is made up of. We're going to get a lot of leadership insights and we're going to get some knowledge that we can use in our professional and personal lives. With Dr. D, get ready because I am here to welcome in the studio none other than our global leader and advisor, Pranav Bhanage. So let's welcome Pranav to the studio. Hi, Pranav.
Hi there, and hello to all the viewers. Lovely introduction.
So, Pranav, how was Diwali with loved ones?
Was brilliant. I was in Pune actually, so it
Oh,
was a good time to sort of take a break, sort of link up with everybody, and have
right.
kind of no sort of nonsense conversations. Those helped.
Absolutely. They help to unwind and come back. And Pranav, you're currently the advisor, and you've also been an experienced MD and CEO at Petronas Lubricants India Private Limited. Well, you're a mentor, you're an angel investor, you're a strategy consultant. You are doing a lot as a leadership, I would say, apostle of strength for many companies around the world. But here's what I noticed that you've always worked with big companies. How did that happen? Did you never think of working with a smaller company? What has been your biggest two learning key takeaways?
Uh, I think I don't think it's by design that I've ended up working where I have. I remember doing this really interesting chat with the was it the IIT Kharagpur students, and they asked me a similar question, and I had made a chart of sort of a retrospective chart of what was actually happening. So I would say it's just sort of a string of things that come together, and particularly you mentioned that a lot of your viewers are young. um, the goal, although the goal is visible, the way to the goal is never a straight line. So
Exactly.
when you reflect back, uh, typically what people tend to do is put a linear narrative saying that okay, I did this, then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, but it's never a linear narrative. And even if you look at history, for example, is never a linear narrative. I mean, it's always a lot of happening at the same time, and every day you're making like a decision that sort of impacts your next few days, few years, few decades of your lives. So I think it's that's the spirit in which I look back on what I've done, and I think those opportunities sort of came by. If there is some commonality I could draw is, I think, there's a lot of I would say, um, you know by design, taking some career risks, in terms of taking the most difficult sort of an option of all the options that are available. I think that's
Right.
been kind of been a little bit of a masochistic trait that is there in what I've done. And I think it'll
Right.
continue in the future as well. So what I'm going to do post this, starting January, is again into something very, very different.
Wow. We are looking forward to what your new chapter entails. So, tell us what has been your top two learnings of working so far with big organizations and the top two challenges?
I think they maybe again from a perspective of a student or a young person, we think that uh, the organization should work the way we imagine, and that
Hmm.
is something that myth sort of goes away over a period of time. You realize that organization, as it's the definition of that English word, is actually the organization of people. So one of
Right,
the top learnings is that it's a collection of people, uh, a team of people, and a very large group of people working toward a cause or a purpose or an intent. And is that the individual contribution, although it's important, it's not the end all sum all for us. It's about how you move the entire group of people together towards the cause and purpose that we have. So I think that's number
right,
one sort of a learning if I have when I look back at large organizations. And uh, the ethos or the cultures of the organization is actually a sum, to a large degree, is a sum of all these people working together. And it's sort of some sort of a lowest common denominator, or it could be whatever that is across this group that is there. And so the second learning is whether all the organizations are good. I think, when people come together for a purpose, it's always a good intent. But the great learning that I think when I look back is that whether that group of people is right for me or not. That's something that as an individual working in the corporations, you need to continuously distill and see whether this brings the best out of me, whether this group of people can get the best out of me, or this group of people does not bring the best out of me. I think that's the second reflection that becomes very, very important for individuals who are
right,
going through this chain. And a lot of times you see that people come and people go, or people stick together for a long time because it may not be because of the money or the financial aspect of it, although it's important. But a lot of time it's because, hey, I enjoy working with this bunch of people, and I think it's bringing the best of my abilities.
right.
So I see a lot of people try to fit in. So let's say you doing what you're doing, right? So I heard your introduction, and I was thinking I can never introduce a show like what you did. And and so if somebody makes me a content producer or something, I'll struggle like hell. So it doesn't bring the best out of me. It's not my cup of tea. So that realization for people
Right.
uh, can happen early or late, but I really hope that if guys are serious about the careers that they want, then this realization is important.
Very well said, and thank you for the compliment. Well, I'll just lap it up. You made my day. It's the start of the day. So let's talk about the two challenges. I'm curious to know that does Pranav face challenges in his journey, and if yes, how bad were they? How demotivated were you? How did you overcome it?
I think challenges are there every day, whether it's personal. I mean, let's look at it personal to start with.
Hmm.
Um, if you look at my trajectory of movements, I've moved a lot of countries, a lot of continents, and every move is not easy. I think as you grow older, um, you have to really take your family along with you. It's very disruptive for your social
Right.
circle, for your kids, for your spouses. So that challenge of taking a personal challenge and balancing it with the professional challenge, balancing it with the personal sort of sacrifices. I think that can be very, very hard, and that impacts sometimes your ability to perform, ability to deliver results as such. So I think that's a challenge that a lot of us face, especially the ones who are always sort of moving uh, every once in a while. I think the second challenge would be the uh, there is too much of the narratives that are there around leaderships or companies are all the good ones. I mean, if you
Hmm.
if you if you look at look at social media, look at media as a whole. I think there are all these success stories and
Absolutely.
so the stuff that is all great, good, doing great. This guy is like a superhero CEO, and then this girl who's done this 30 before 30, whatever that
And it's
nonsense is.
painting so much of illusory
Exactly.
complexes in everybody's mind. And there's a sense of moment marketing, right? People are just claiming the wins all the time. So much so that we had the final match, and then people had on LinkedIn a lot of things to say as if they contributed. They didn't even bother to go to the stadium to watch the match.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think at the same time, there are about 40, I was just sort of following that story about 40 miners trapped into the tunnel in Uttarakhand. And,
Exactly.
what they are going through, the range of emotions that they and their families must be going through is something we can't even fathom
Not at
at
all.
all. So I think, those, so that coming back to your question as to what could be a challenge is that a lot of times the expectations could be on the positives. The expectations on how do you grow, how do you deliver 2x, 5x, how do you create value, how do you. So it's all about, you know, tomorrow being better than today. But
Right.
I would say that not all tomorrows are better than today, right? I mean, you would have some results which are not as good. You'll have, some days which are really not as good. And I think that's the biggest challenge that the leaders and professionals do face because
Right.
they're every day coming to work saying that I'll do better. And you said, I think, how do you become a better version of you every day? That means every day improvement. And I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think honestly, uh, improvement is a function of not only internal but external. I think the external environments have to be perfect. I'll give another story here. I remember I was talking to one of the leader coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and this was just after COVID. So we were speaking in 2021, and he was narrating a story which where he had a conversation with the CEO of Pfizer in
Okay.
2021 January, and he asked the CEO of Pfizer was what's your biggest challenge, or rather it was end of 2020. So he basically asked uh, the CEO was what's your biggest fear, and he said it's
Right.
2021 because 2020 for the guys like Pfizer's and all these guys was a sort of a reverse of a black swan, right? I mean, they had a
Exactly.
windfall in terms of their profits and their brand.
Absolutely.
But 2021 was unfortunately not as big a wave as COVID for them, but good for
Right.
the humanity. So I think that's in a nutshell that there's this continuous pressure of being better can get to you, and how do you manage that? How do you not get caught into that rut and get caught into that sort of a on that wheel? I guess that's one of the important uh, learnings that I've had. I call it wisdom, or you call it just become wiser,
I
and
know.
would
And
be
I'm still
important.
gonna deep dive. I'm gonna deep dive further. I'm gonna scratch the surface, and I'm gonna ask you like a question that Pranav, have you ever felt rejected or dejected? You've had such a long journey. You've had a very on the surface, everybody sees the success of Pranav. Now, I want us to know that, and I do, I feel demotivated, I feel dejected, and then I have to pull myself out of it. But I want to know, and our viewers want to know, does Pranav feel that? And if yes, how do you overcome it?
No, absolutely. I think it's as one thing is that when you take up a leadership position, that your rejection is not your personal rejection, but rejection of your vision, rejection of your team,
Right,
rejection of a project, or rejection from a client. So
right,
a lot of this sort of affects you personally and professionally. So, for any leader, I would say, I'm sure you've interviewed very smart people, very successful people here. I'm sure everybody must have confessed that there've been a lot of rejection. So, I think, a lot of time your strategies that you have in mind don't work. There are projects that you want to go after, they don't come through. There are
Mm-hmm.
results that you want to deliver, you fall short. So
Right.
all these things happen uh, all the time. And I think the good anecdote here is is that was it Michael Jordan? He was asked that, how did you get 30,000 3 pointers? And he said that, my friend, you've not seen 100,000 I've missed. So,
Yes.
so that's true for everybody, I guess. And for me, it's also been the same. I think sometimes you don't get your way through the strategy you had in mind. The impact is not as good as what you expected. Then you
Right.
need to course correct it through the time. But what is important, D, here is that as a leader, this rejection becomes more challenging, and I'll tell you why. It's not the person that so you almost role play this rejection
Hmm. Hmm.
because your personal emotions cannot be shared with, say, 100 300 people that are there with you.
Exactly.
You can. So you go through this, so almost like this 5 stages of grief within 3 seconds. uh,
Internalize.
yeah, internalize the five. So all the 5 stages is internal. 3 seconds you go through it, and then you process it, and then you narrate, then you figure out, okay, what could be the impact of this on what kind of people. So the impact on a senior leadership team would be different. The impact on the middle management would be different. The impact of the plant, the manufacturing plant, and all that, I think, which
That would be different.
probably you guys don't have a lot of access to that kind of category of people that work with us. That's very, very different. I mean, for them, the smallest of the thing can have a biggest of the whiplash. Um, so I think the rejection, not only you internalize the rejection, then you process it, then you compartmentalize it, and then you communicate it to different kind of people in a different kind of way. I think therein lies the art.
Right.
Um, where you almost it's almost like a role play. I think, I mean, people who've done movies or plays, I think they would understand. I mean, even if they have a personal loss, they can do a comedy on screen. So it's almost like that. So I think to have that uh, assurance or self-awareness, I think that is supremely important. Not to get riled up in the emotion, that is supremely important. Then you compartmentalize the communications, talk to different people in different ways. Make sure that the team sort of accepts it. Make sure that the team analyzes it. But next day comes out and say, why don't we, or why don't we do it in a different way? Why don't we pivot? I
Right.
think that is a tougher part than actually just the rejection.
Right. But I think when you're internalizing and sorting out and processing your emotions so fast, because as a leader, especially a global leader such as yourself, your decision making is what has repercussions, but it also needs to be very time bound, right?
Yes,
You
yes.
you've been at the board member level. I mean, you've been at the global strategy level. So tell me about your mental health, because a lot of youngsters that I coach and I mentor, a lot of professionals who are doing professionally very well in their careers are struggling with a lot of life decisions, a lot of mental health decisions, because the internalization is having a fallout. And I know a lot of leaders are going through
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there a coping strategy that you think you have used that you can share with us that a lot of us can imbibe?
See, I think one of the coping strategies, which also I share with my team, is that um, your professional self is all that you're playing. So yeah, you are an advisor or CEO from, say, 9 to whatever. In India, it's not 9 to 5; it's probably 9 to 9. But
Right.
nevertheless, but that's not you as a person. That's the role. And whatever happens in that role, whatever failures, successes, and it's true for successes. I think the bigger challenge is that people who have tasted success, when they face failure, I think that's a bigger challenge. But nevertheless, I think the coping strategy is such that when you come out of that role, when you come home, or when you're with your friends, or when you're doing when you're doing something else, that's important, because that's only one piece of what went wrong, or that's only
Right.
one piece of stress. So the ability to switch on and switch off um, is the number one ability that is important, and sometimes a lot of leaders or people fail because they assume that the role is there, but that's not. I mean,
Right.
today I'm not a CEO, but so the role is gone. So it shouldn't be on my head that okay, I have to do this or that. So that's one thing I've sort of used with myself, and also advise these people who come and talk to me. New leaders, I think, usually suffer when they come
Right.
from managerial position to a leadership position. It's very hard to sort of um, make that transition and make sure that you're not continuously thinking about the role all the time. Um, Secondly, I think a little bit of having a little bit of a dark humor and you know looking at things in a third person
Right.
is very good actually. When you look at yourself as a third person, you feel that
Right.
you're a complete moron, right? Most of the times. And that's so there are a lot of good authors who write a third person comedy, and I think observational comedy or observational satire. So having that bit of a bent of mind is important because sometimes we give ourselves a lot of importance. We think that we are moving the world. We think we are contributing to India becoming 5 trillion economy. No, I mean, yeah, we are very small in this global context. Uh, so having that sense of where you belong in the universe and what you are is really
Right.
cool. I remember I did this. Was it one of the I don't know which institutions, some academic institution. So I showed them a picture that was taken by it was taken by Voyager 1 or 2. I don't know which one. It was the first one to reach Saturn. I think it was two,
Okay.
and it took a picture of Earth from from very close to Saturn, right? So Saturn and
Right.
Earth were aligned, and that picture is, I think it's available on the web. So it's one of the first images of Earth from that far a distance. And Earth looks like a dot, basically dot,
Right.
not even blue and all that. It's just a speck.
Dot. Right.
So, that's where we are. That's Earth. So if you
Right.
break it down to a D or a Pranav, I mean, that's nothing, nothing. So I think that perspective helps because, hey, at the end of the day, we're just here. I mean, we're here for short term, and we just need to
Right.
do whatever we can to the best of the ability, and having the right intent. I think that's important. I think sometimes if your intent is off, then whatever I said doesn't make sense. But if the intent is always to do the right thing, then
Right.
in the ups and downs is part and parcel.
Wow, very well said. I think to all the viewers, this is going to be golden words. The intent matters. Pranav, you've shared with us about moving the world. That phrase came up, and I'm gonna get to my next question, which is about moving the world, because your industry moves and shakes the world every now and then. Countries fight over it. We have wars, we have current affairs. It plays a huge role in the Ukraine war as well. So tell me your take. I mean, oil and gas industry, just break it down, dumb it down for all of us. How controversial are we talking in the current time, especially with the current landscape of global affairs?
Um, well, I think basically oil and gas has three parts. So you have the upstream, which is basically exploration, where you find the oil or the gas. Then you have the midstream, which is the processing, and then you have the downstream, which is basically what we sell as products or derivatives of oil and gas. So the reason why um, ONG still is one of the key sectors of this on Earth, along with say finance and chemicals, is that because it's one of the core sectors, right? Because you're
Right.
talking about energy, you're talking about so far one of the cheapest sources of energy, sources of cheapest sources of energy that can be stored and transported as well. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the derivatives of oil and gas are
Yes.
used in almost everything. So,
Exactly.
right from your aerosols to plastics to this pen that I'm using or whatever, everything has a little bit of a molecule of oil and gas. That most of these things have a lot of molecules of hydrocarbons that are getting consumed or used.
Right.
Because of this nature of it touching a lot of aspects of an economy, it becomes an important sector. So, for example, even for India, as we plan to now, we've just crossed 4 trillion. As we plan to become 5 trillion and more, the consumption of the energy for growth is directly correlated. So, if you don't have energy, you can't grow. You can't have
Right.
power cuts and grow 2x. It's never going to happen.
Right.
So that's the importance of the sector, and unfortunately, again, because of the sort of evolution over the 100 years, um, and because this form of energy can be easily transported and can be stored, can be transferred, can be transported, and the calorific value or the energy that it carries is quite high. The energy has evolved, the value chain has evolved in such a way that you have some countries which are producers, and then you have consumption all over the world. And that's possible because of supply chain, that's possible because of the economics, it's possible because the technology, the safety technology, all the stuff that has evolved in over 100 years. So
Absolutely.
this space has a 100 year 120 years of history, evolution, innovation, uh, technology, so on and so forth. And that's why it's a core sector of the economy. And that's this very nature where you can produce it somewhere and use it somewhere else. I think that creates a lot of imbalance if you look at it in the other way. And that's true for food as well. Huh? Now you have wheat being produced in Central Asia, or you have sugar coming from Brazil. So food, energy, unfortunately, if you go back 500 years, it was all localized. You cut your wood, you come home, you burn it, that's it. Chula jalao.
It was simple.
Yes, it's
Now
localized.
everything is yeah, and it's all complex today, right?
I don't know about the simple and complex, but I know whether it's localized or not. So I think
Okay.
when it's not localized, then there is a lot of interdependency on other factors. So you're
Right.
dependent upon the geopolitical situation in producer countries, the transport countries like Suez Canal, whether it's Panama Canal, all these places where it's getting transferred, Malacca Straits, so where it's getting moved. So
Right.
suddenly that the gas that you turn on at home is dependent upon 7 or 8 countries to be functioning properly to get your rice cooked. So philosophically, it is just complex in the sense because it is distributed.
Right.
And that's why these two factors, because of the wide distribution network and very core sector of the economy, it becomes an important sector. And at the same time, now with the current state of global warming and etc., now it becomes that most of these practices may not be very, very conducive to Mother Nature. So
Right.
those get questioned at all. So I think that's where we are in terms of understanding this space in a very simplistic way. But this framework can be used for most of the other commodities. So if you look at lithium, it's not very different because it's been found in Bolivia, it's been processed in China, and then used in a battery in your phone or
Right.
this laptop.
Right.
So it's not very different from oil and gas. So I guess the question is why it is controversial or something. I think because of the dependency, you can't really control the geopolitics in many other countries. You don't know what will
Well,
happen, what can go wrong.
all the more reasons to keep world peace. But we're still
Absolutely,
struggling.
absolutely. And I think that's what that's what in the first half of this last century was what US was trying to do, right? Is to have access to the producer countries, have control over the producers countries. So that was the sort of a geopolitical strategy. But of course, that's I'm not a geopolitical expert. But now with the we are no longer a bipolar world. It's not the Soviet versus the US era which we grew up in.
Not at all.
So
Yeah.
now it's a multipolar world. So all the more challenges to keeping this value chain, all parts of the value chain functioning the way you want.
Functioning.
Because anything goes off, your price is gonna go up.
So, in the interest of keeping the value chain functioning, let's talk about the transferable skills of a leader. I mean, today you're an advisor, and I'm sure you're using those skills. But you've held many roles, you've worn many hats. How do we use, and which are those? Let's say if I were to ask you top three skills that everybody can invest in keeping it sharp, because these skills are going to be handy because Pranav used them throughout your career. What are those top three leadership competencies?
Um, yeah, I shared this with somebody who asked me a similar question. I think number one is having clarity of vision. Um,
Okay.
is number one. I think I always would always advocate that a leader is someone who has real clarity of where he or she wants to take this organization. The path may be a little wavered,
Different.
but if that leader in most of the certain times, I would say, I think in context of COVID would be slightly different, but basically in a normal circumstances, under normal
Right.
circumstances, if he or she has to have a clarity of vision, and you can break it down to the smallest of the things, like for example, your show, you have a clear purpose, what
Right.
it's meant to be for this target audience that is watching it, and that
Right.
once you have that clarity in your mind, then the rest of the things can be dictated, can be tailored, can be developed. And you can then communicate with your team what you want. You can get the content the way you want. And that's the same for you scale it up higher is the same. Um, that skill usually um, is more you need to develop it. I think you need to have a clarity of your own thought. You need to be you need to be very self-reflective. You need to have reflections. You need to converse with people to get this stuff
Right.
going. So
Right.
that's number one. I think second comes from ability to communicate that and break it down into pieces to different components of the organization. A lot of time you feel, hey, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. There's so much of confusion. Oh, the left hand is not talking to the right hand.
Right.
And these are very common. I think as the organization becomes large and complex, this is pretty much common. So the ability to sort of break it into pieces, what it means for different things, what it means for different
True.
departments, and what it means for technology, what it means for marketing, what does it mean for sales, what does it mean for finance. I think that sort of that ability is a second good ability of a leader. Now, of course, he or she is not doing it independently. I think they have the
This is
teams. Yeah, there are people to talk to, so on and so forth. So, but this becomes an important aspect. I think the third one, which has become more relevant in the last, I wouldn't have said this say 5 years ago, but I say this now, um, is the ability to become anti-fragile or pivot. So, because the external environments are changing so fast, I know it sounds like a
exactly.
motherhood, but it is true. I think I was just talking to somebody in the medical devices space, and he said that they are afraid of any startup sort of coming up with a product which is very, very different, and it can ruin the 10 years of effort a large corporation has taken. So
Correct.
these threats probably were not there 10 years ago. I think it took a long, you could create your moat and you could protect your margins for a longer period of time.
Right.
So this, and now with environmental challenges, questions on ongoing concerns, change of technology, say diesel we will ban, now we will do this and that. So whatever you're doing today may not be even relevant tomorrow. And this is happening quicker and quicker. So the third ability of a leader is actually having having to set up a system, a culture, which is anti-fragile, which means that every time there is a disruption, you come out stronger.
Right.
It's not a very rigid, strong structure where one disruption, it all breaks into pieces.
Right.
So how do you create the anti-fragile structure where you can pivot, where you improve from the shocks, where you manage a
Adapt.
lot of shock, adapt from the
Right.
shocks?
Adapt from the shocks.
So
Right.
that would be the third sort of a trait which is becoming more and more important now. And I see a lot of leaders sort of having that stress of going through it. It's not easy. I mean, whatever
Especially
I'm
in the
saying,
current times. I think
it's
2023
not.
has been very testing for a lot of leaders.
Because it takes a while to develop your product, to develop your customers, to get the profits that you want, or you get the margins that you want, and that can go away in a jiffy. uh, that
Exactly.
that impacts the whole chain. It impacts your
Right.
plans, 5 years, 10 years, investments. So, say for example, I was talking to somebody in the automotive space. I say, okay, if the country decides really to ban diesel, then what are we going to
What are
do?
we going to do? Yeah,
What
exactly.
are we going to do with the trucks? And then the cost of financing of the trucks goes up.
It's a ripple effect.
It's a
Yeah,
ripple effect. The cost of financing of the trucks goes up, then the truck guy will charge more, so your food will cost more.
exactly.
So everything can, all the plans that you made on X, now you got to plan on 10X. So I
10x.
think that's the biggest of the lacunas that are there right now, and the biggest of the monsters that is invisible, but it's really breaking on the heads of the leaders every day.
Wow. So many valuable insights, and I think there are many learning takeaways for all of us as we come to the conclusion of this amazing conversation. Pranav, I think I can talk to you all day, but I need to be mindful of your time. um, I want to pivot, and I want to talk about, because we have a lot of professional women who watch the show as well, and in the interest of creating an inclusive workspace as a CEO, you did a lot in your organization. What is it that CXOs can do today to make our workspace more inclusive? Because let me tell you, in uncertain times, that uncertainty has also gone up. And my coaches and mentees, they tell us. So what can we do? Can you share some learnings from your experience that maybe CEOs watching the show can imbibe and probably take it home to their organizations?
Well, I'll start with the first note. I think if you look at the global setup of Petronas Lubricants International, I think our global MD is a lady, and the
Yes.
CFO is a lady as well. So we have a very good sort of a diversification even at the highest echelons of the
Next level.
organization. And I think Petronas has done an amazing job in terms of uh, giving that um, giving that space and also creating that culture where we look at meritocracy very 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 in a very, very sharp way. Uh, well, I would say that there are a few things. I was asked this question in the last conversation I had on the dais. Was it at the IIM Mumbai space? So again, to me, number one, I mean, there is no mantra, but number one, I think good organizations always look at meritocracy is a common trait. So
Right.
it really doesn't matter who is applying for the job, as long as
Right.
he or she has the skills, she has the temperament, he or she has the ability, well, the job is there. um, so that the having that meritocratic culture, I think that's the fulcrum of good organizations. And I think in all the organizations that I have worked for, if you look at the Boston Consulting Group, look at Wipro, take Petronas, there's a good amount of mix we have in the junior senior positions
Right.
across. And the common trait across all that is meritocratic. I think they just promote good people. Uh,
Correct.
Number two, There are also companies which um, emphasize a lot on HSAC, which is the health, safety, and environment. So oil and gas, for example, uh, HSAC is a culture. Safety, we ensure everybody goes home safely every day. When you
Right.
have safety as a core value of the organization, I think it becomes a lot more inclusive space. Um, so this gets translated like into simplest of things, right? Wearing your safety belt, seat belt when you sit in the car.
Exactly.
So we're having, HSSC compliant cars for everybody.
And today we
Um,
talk about
the,
emotional safety, mental safety, physical
Correct,
safety.
psychological safety, emotional safety. So that culture of safety um, perhaps creates the right base for
Right.
people to participate, um, whether it's gender or others, everybody to participate. So I think that's the second ethos that I can sort of draw out of these companies that I've been associated with. Now the question is, there are certain jobs, there are certain roles which are a little bit tricky. So for example, even the plant, say manufacturing kind of roles, or you have say remote kind of roles, or the roles which say field sales roles, but they just go into really difficult areas or outskirts or upcountry markets. Now that's where there is a dilemma at the leadership level, that whether we will have a safe environment for a woman who's working. So again, if I link it back to the safety culture,
Safety
I think
as
those
well. Every,
so the
yes.
decisions get impacted. So most of the times I've seen that in a great organizations, the decisions usually are the pivot is only on safety. I mean, it's just like whether it's safe or not.
Right.
And unfortunately in India, I think certain places this is a very, very important criteria. Even now, after
So,
4 trillion, we are still
yes.
having basic safety.
But in your opinion, are women leaders more forgiving or men leaders?
I don't know. See, again, I mean, I usually steer away from the debates of whether it's a man versus woman. I think it's always about personalities. And I
Okay.
think I have seen different personalities across in different people,
Right.
agnostic of gender. So I think the leadership style, leadership ability, the leadership path, I think that's all dependent on the personality of the individual. And I have not, I mean, I wouldn't say whether, I have not really seen that whether this is directly correlated to the gender per se. I think people like to make that simplistic correlation,
Right.
but in my head, it doesn't exist.
Very well said. So, your parting thoughts with our viewers. Everybody's chasing success today, especially in these dynamic times. What would you like to say?
Well, I think number one, I would like to say two things. I think first is that don't anchor your next self or your next vision of yourself on what you see on social media or what you see in media as a whole, because
True.
um, what it does is that it just curates all the good stories and takes away all the hardships. So I think, and sometimes a super fast success um, is good, but it's not common. So I think the more you try to anchor yourself to these kind of stories, and then you put that undue pressure on yourself that you have to be this and that by X amount of time in your life, I think that's not, that's something you should not do.
Not
Um,
sustainable, I think.
it's not sustainable, and people have different paths. I think, you have the guy who see he was like 65 years old. So, and today
Right.
KFC, his face is there all over the world. So, I think it's a successful franchise. Uh, so everybody has a different path. So I think that is very, very important to sort of get into your rhythm and follow that rhythm.
Right.
I think secondly, this is a debate I have a lot with others as well, is there has to be a floor for your life. I think you must say that better than this. I think that floor is what keeps you going. It's not the ceiling. I think ceiling, people get anchored on, okay, I want to have a big mansion, like $2 billion mansion. in Mumbai. I think
Right,
that's not the anchor. But you could
right.
say that I want to have a good life. Say I want to have a decent place to stay. I want to have a car with a driver. I think that's some basic floors of life is good to set that because that will help you to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone. But not anchoring on the ceiling also makes it, like you said, doesn't put an undue pressure on the individual. So
True.
that's I would say the second piece for the people who are watching it. But I think life is a lot more than just a professional success. Yeah, I think there's too much of hankering on or harping on ye karo wo karo tab tak do this by this time, do
Bilkul.
this by that's too much. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot can be done otherwise. uh, like I know my wife sort of volunteers to teach yoga to the municipal schools here in Mumbai,
Wow.
and the kind of experiences she has with them is really great because some of them, of course it's a diverse class, but two or three really
Right.
like it and they're like, okay, this is really giving them a meaning. So there's a lot of stuff that as an individual you can do, which is not
Right.
only your professional journey and the resume that you're after, because after 55, 60, the resumes and all will not matter. So I
Not
think
bad.
to get that network right, to get that ecosystem where you can do different things, that's also very, very important.
Fabulous. Pranav, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. And I think you just energized my intellectual cells. And I'm very confident that anybody who watches this show is going to be very inspired and motivated to do better, to be better, and not be in the rat race and not chase success blindly, not believe the perceptions that media reflects, and also believe that everybody has a story. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Have a great day. Bye, Pranav.
Bye bye.
Wow, that was some conversation. Well, invigorating conversation to say the least. My dear friends, there are stories and there are learnings from many global leaders that we can imbibe. And if we can learn from their experiences and be a better version of ourselves, why not? This is exactly my endeavor. I'm going to try to bring you global leaders who have a narrative and who have a story, who are unafraid of sharing their challenges and their learning outcomes. Just keep learning, just keep growing, because that's exactly what's going to keep us going in these uncertain times. So let's get ready for another exciting episode. Well, who's going to be there is a surprise for all of you. Until then, keep writing your feedback to me. And don't forget to follow us on all the podcast channels, that is Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcast, and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much. I'm Dr. D, wishing you all a great work week ahead and keep smiling.